Celeste is a 2D platformer developed by an indie studio called Maddie Makes Games in 2016. I played it for the first time then, when it came out, and I loved the game to pieces. The movement system was the most gratifying to interact with of any 2D platformer I had ever played. Furthermore, its soundtrack and visual design were just oozing with charm. Years later, recently, I've played Celeste again, and have taken a surprisingly different perspective on it. I've come to realize that yes, these gameplay elements made Celeste great, but that it was actually Celeste's story that made it truly unforgettable. The game focuses on a 30-something-year-old girl named Madeline who decides to climb a mountain. Simple enough, right? Immediately, though, the game rears its head of underlying complexity. A crazy old lady says to Madeline as she embarks on the mountain, "You should know, Celeste Mountain is a strange place. You might see things you ain't ready to see." This line is highly ominous. Madeline takes this in stride, though. Just a crazy old lady doing her thing, right? It quickly becomes clear this is not the case. In the second level of the game, a dark, purple version of Madeline bursts out of a mirror she looks into. This character has been appropriately named by the fanbase of Celeste as Badeline. Right away, when Madeline meets Badeline, she fears her. Badeline meets this bad reaction with equally negative retort, verbally beating Madeline into the ground. She tells Madeline she's pathetic, selfish, and that there's absolutely no way she can climb this mountain. Madeline responds to this with anger, telling Badeline to shut up and running away from her. She tells Badeline that she's disgusting and that she's everything she needs to leave behind. Despite Maddie's attempts, Badeline does not go away, and this back and forth continues for the duration of her climb. Badeline chases Madeline through a haunted hotel, a golden ridge, and many other locales, sabotaging her every step of the way. Madeline just barely escapes the Hall of Mirrors, where Badeline's power is at its maximum, and where Madeline just barely escapes with her life thanks to Badeline. After this triumph, she is close to the peak, and should reach it the next morning. Before she goes to bed, she has a reflective conversation with her good friend Theo, where she realizes just how much harm Badeline is bringing to her. She decides that her triumph over the mountain will mean nothing if she's not able to also leave Badeline behind. In her dreams that night, she calls upon Badeline. She tells her once and for all that she finally understands who she is. "You're not my true reflection," she says. "You're everything I need to leave behind. And I am finally going to set you free." Badeline responds violently, yelling at Madeline, "You think you can just leave me behind? You think you can blame everything on me? You think you're above me?" Madeline begs her to calm down, but this only enrages her more deeply. She snaps at Madeline, saying, "You're not above me, and you can't climb this mountain. It's time to accept that." She then collapses the ground around Madeline, sending her tumbling, not just all the way down the mountain, but below even where she started. At this point, Maddie is completely defeated. She begrudgingly climbs out of the cave she fell into to make it back to her car. She says to the crazy old woman from earlier in the story, "That part of me was right. I can't do this. I'll just go home to my sad life and be miserable forever. The crazy old lady then tells Madeline that it's a shame that she feels that way because she was really rooting for her. Got a lot of kids come here to climb this mountain and almost all of them walk away. She tells Maddie of all the kids she's ever seen come here, she's never met any as angry at themselves as her. She then offers a new perspective on Badeline, telling Maddie she has to find out why Badeline is so scared. She urges her to stop wasting time and go ask her. This perspective surprises Maddie. This is something she had never considered before. As Madeline walks away, the crazy lady reminds her, there's no shame in running back to your car and driving away. Someday, you'll be ready. Then, you'll come back. Madeline responds firmly, saying, no, I'm seeing this through. Unsurprisingly, Badeline's not exactly open to this heart-to-heart conversation. Madeline chases her to the very heart of the cave, where she finally tells Badeline how she feels. She tells Badeline that she understands why she is afraid, and that she's sorry for trying to abandon her. Badeline does not listen, reminding Madeline repeatedly how she said she did not need her. Finally, Madeline stands her ground against Badeline. She tells her that they have to move on from that. She proposes to her, let's climb out of here. Together. Bounding forward into Badeline. This sets off an explosion. Suddenly, rocks fall all around Badeline and Madeline. The screen glitches and shakes. The background becomes confused and chaotic. Badeline takes a defensive stance. Despite this, Madeline bounds into Badeline repeatedly, embracing her forcefully and at any cost. The whole world seems to collapse in this moment as Madeline's sense of self is violently disrupted and redefined. She finally catches up to Badeline and comforts her, telling her it's okay to be afraid, and giving her a hug. Something remarkable then happens. Madeline levels up. For the first and only time in this game, her hair changes color, and she gains the ability to double jump. The game takes a massive breath at this point, going from chaotic and stressful to calm and serene. Madeline and Badeline are finally communicating. They're finally one. At this point, Madeline meets back up with the crazy old lady and Theo to discuss what has just happened. She tells them that they were right, and that Badeline was not at all as malicious or scary as she believed. She tells them that she has decided that after all this, she's still going to climb the mountain. The crazy lady points out that it won't be easy, but that she thinks if they do it together, they still have a chance. Badeline still reacts apprehensively, but Madeline reminds her that it's okay to be afraid. She asserts that this is something that we want to do, and that we have to try one last time. She then drops her bag and heads back up to the base of the mountain. So what'd you think of that? It's a pretty profound story for a 2D side-scrolling video game. No? The narrative and the symbols within it have a multitude of potential interpretations. One way you can view this story is a message about living with mental illness. When looked at through this lens, it highlights the damage you can do to yourself by not accepting your mental illness. It shows that by trying to purge yourself of it, you will only build deeper anger and resentment towards yourself that, in the end, will sabotage you. It also shows that you cannot run away from your mental illness in pursuit of what you perceive as larger goals, such as climbing a mountain. Rather, it implies that you need to learn to live with your mental illness, rather than fighting against it to achieve these goals. Celeste proposes you can do this by accepting your weaknesses and realizing it's okay to feel overwhelmed or afraid. Furthermore, it suggests that maybe these feelings are not weaknesses at all. After all, they are a part of you built to protect yourself, And if you can learn to live with them, they can actually be quite useful and help you attain your goals. This message is extremely profound and applicable to all people. This was the interpretation I walked away with when I played this game through for the first time in 7th grade. Today, after my more recent playthrough of Celeste, more than 8 years later, I have grown to view the narrative in a very different light. I now interpret Celeste as an allegory for transgender experiences. There are several hints throughout the game that imply that Battleline represents underlying feelings of gender dysphoria that Madeline is experiencing. From this perspective, Celeste is a game about a girl coming to terms with her transgender identity. In the years after Celeste came out, the creator Maddie Thorson came forwards, clarifying that Madeline is canonically a woman who is transgender herself. This adds to the complexity of this portrayal, as visibly, Maddie has already transitioned. This highlights the separation between coming to terms with one's transgender identity and actually transitioning. It shows that someone such as Maddie, who is deep into their transition, can still grapple with accepting their transgender identity. This is something I relate to deeply. When I was home, before I came to Eastern for this semester, I was 100% out of the closet. I was presenting as a woman full-time. It was liberating and I was very happy, but something lingered in the corner, still nagging at me. Nagging at me in quiet moments when no one spoke. Something was just not right. Eventually, in spite of my transition, my mental health actually started to get worse rather than better, and I started having debilitating anxiety over the possibility I would lose all of my transition progress when I moved into Eastern. To my dismay, this exact thing would end up happening. Turns out, it's a lot harder to be confident when you aren't surrounded by people who love you. It took me a while to realize why this happened. Eventually, though, it hit me. Celeste was actually the catalyst for this realization. I realized that, like Madeline, I was extremely angry at myself. Even when I was home and was presenting as who I wanted to be, I realized that on the inside, I never really accepted that I was transgender. If my mountain was my transition, like Madeline, I had been chased the whole way up by a dark part of me. A part of me I refused to confront. Like Madeline, I ended up being sabotaged by this shadow, losing everything when I went to school. I fell all the way back down to the bottom of my mountain. This was incredibly painful and demotivating. In fact, it resulted in one of the most powerful episodes of depression I've ever experienced in my life. This, at the moment, sucked. With hindsight though, I'm infinitely grateful I endured this failure. I'm glad I fell down my mountain, so that I will be forced to stop and ask that dark part of myself, why? Why are you so angry with me? Why are you so afraid? Like Madeline, I could not climb my mountain alone. I needed this part of me on my side. I needed to fall down so that I could accept myself for who I truly am, forgive myself for the pain I have caused, and finally let go of the past. This game, Celeste, helped me realize all of this. That is a very impressive feat for a video game. Recently, thanks to this game and immense efforts outside of it, I feel as if I finally began to accept who I really am. Like Madeline, I'm still disheartened by my failure and fall, but I also recognize I just have to move on. With this mindset, I've begun to love that I'm transgender. Even better, I've begun to get excited for the future that's ahead of me. I've started to look in the mirror and see a woman and love what I see. More so than ever. Even the Even before, when I was very aggressively, outwardly presenting as a female. Funny how that works, isn't it? With this renewed relationship I have with my fears and doubts, I feel as though I can get through this. I don't feel as if I have to prove to myself I'm transgender or justify that I feel that way. Rather, I feel as if I can just breathe. I can just acknowledge that there's no reason, nor do I want there to be. That I just am who I am, and who I am is beautiful. With this level up, climbing this mountain will still be hard, perilous even. I believe, though, that if we work together, I can really do this. In the end, if the player chooses to see their journey through, they can make it to the top of the mountain. Here, Battleline asks Madeline, "What now?" She tells Madeline she's afraid of what will happen when they leave the mountain. She tells her she's afraid things will go back to the way they were before. Madeline assures Battleline she will not let that happen, and that she can't go back either. Battleline tells Madeline she's still afraid, but that she trusts her now.